astrology initiates, so I'm going to give it a moment because sometimes it doesn't kick on right away in the playback. I'll say it again. Hey there, all my rotation 411 astrology initiates, or rotation information initiates is what the 411 acronym would be. At least in the United States, 411 is information. So, anyways, I'm not feeling so hot today, but I haven't been able to get on all week, and I definitely probably won't be able to get on tomorrow. So here we are. We're going to start lecture 4 today and see what it's all about. As a lot of you asked me where I'm from the West Coast of the United States. So I'm a huge Los Angeles Rams fan when it comes to football. I actually was a fan of them when they were the St. Louis Rams because I used to play Madden with some guys I grew up with, and I'd push all the buttons and I'd win the game. And they're like, how do you do that, you know? But I would always play Kurt Warner on the St. Louis Rams. And so when I had lived in Los Angeles, I said, they're coming back, they're coming back. And everyone that lived there said, no, they've been saying that for 20 years. They're never coming back. Well, maybe I am a little prophetic because, or a little intuitive, because they did end up coming back while I was there. Yeah, so it was pretty exciting. And they did a really good job. I mean, a lot of you that follow astrology may not be football fans, but last Sunday, they took out one of the best teams in football right now, the Bills. And the Bills had like a 10-2 record for the season. So, and the Rams had like a 6-6 record now. So they definitely played their hearts out on Sunday, and they're playing again tonight against San Francisco. So big rivals. So it should be pretty exciting. So I've got a couple Rams things, and I felt like wearing this beanie today, and I didn't feel like taking it off for the video. So, I'm also an Aries, so, probably why I took to the Rams initially, I'm sure. But I have followed them for quite some time now, so anyways, in both cities. I even remember when I was little, I think I liked them because living by Seattle, the Seahawks always lost, and that's what I was forced to watch with my father. So I kind of took on other teams. Let's see. Now we're starting lecture 4 today, and we're reading, 'cause a lot of you will ask me, the outer planets and their cycles, and this is by Liz Green. She's the astrologist. She's written many books, but she also, if you go to astro.com, I believe, I think it's .com, not .org. She writes the horoscopes on there, or she has written them for you. So anyways, we're going to jump into lecture 4. Hi, Diego. Thanks for joining us again. I think I've seen you on here before. I'm just going to jump into this. Like I said, I remember when I was in a film class, the teachers she made us do some kind of, it was like a little exercise on there, and it was a cartoon that said, I'm not feeling so hot today. So I'm not feeling so hot today, but like I said, if I didn't get on, I wouldn't end up getting on before the weekend. So let's jump into lecture 4 and get as far as we can get today. All right. And usually, if you want to watch the previous lectures, this book has 7 lectures. So we've already gone through lectures 1 through 3. And then the intro to the book are all in the playlist in the description box below. I'll also pin it in the comments in the playback. So we're starting lecture 4 today. And it says, before we begin today, are there any leftover questions from the last session? And the audience says, when you're talking about generation influences, the influences of the outer planets, do you use larger orbs than those you would use for a natal chart? And Liz says, no, I would use the same orbs. So let me just quickly, for those of you who don't know what an orb is in astrology, there's 12 signs. So it's quick math too. Might lose some of you here, but there's 12 signs in the zodiac, and it's a wheel, right? And a wheel is 360 degrees. So each sign, 360 divided by 12 is 30 degrees. So when we're looking at planets and conjunctions, how close are the planets together, or what angles are they making to each other? The orb is how many degrees apart that they are. So generally a 5-degree orb is a universal thing, but every astrologist has their own theories and viewpoints on how significant an orb is. But usually the tighter the orb, like a 1-degree orb or a 0-degree orb, is going to be the strongest contact the 2 planets can make, whether it's in your own birth chart or in when we're looking at your birth chart overlaid into somebody else's birth chart and seeing the synastry aspects. So with that being said, Liz says, no, I would use the same orbs. So this is her theory of orbs. of around 8 to 10 degrees for conjunctions and squares and oppositions. That's pretty wide. So I'll just quickly review. If you've been following me at all, you'll know my orbs theories pretty well. But like I said, 5 degrees is most astrologists count 5 degrees. I count 10 degrees when it comes to the luminaries, which are the sun and the moon. And I would say with squares, trines, conjunctions, oppositions, sextiles are all about 5 degrees. Now, when it comes to semi-sextiles and like semi-squares, I do feel like, or especially like quindeciles, I do feel like the orb has to be a little tighter, like 1 to 3 degrees for it to really have a significant like influence where you say, oh, okay, this quindecile is behaving in a certain way for this person or this couple. You're going to see that in a very tight orb, usually, if you're going to notice any significant notes. Hi, nope, I'm not Palestine. I am from the west coast of the United States, but when my cousins did the blood, I do have like a tiny, tiny, tiny percent of lineage that may be from Israel, but originally from Germany. I'm Swiss German. I'm like probably half Germanish, Scandinavian. Anyways, let's not go into all that again. All right, so it says, no, I would use around 8 to 10 degrees for conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, but I think that two planets in the same sign, even if they are not technically conjuncting, tend to give some feeling of a conjunction. So I call that friendly signs, and I know I might confuse some of you sometimes because I'll say friendly sign, and I'll be meaning like two planets in the sign of Aries, right? And kind of going back to 30 degrees. You know, I'll be like, if it's 5 degrees Aries or 25 degrees Aries, that's a 25-degree orb, right? So not highly significant, but I'll be like, it's in a friendly sign. But then I'll switch to friendly signs being like Leo, Aries, and Sagittarius, which are all fire signs, right? Signs in the same element are also friendly, and they make trines to each other or conjunctions. So when I'm talking about friendly signs, I'm generally talking about conjunctions, sextiles, or trines. Okay, just to clarify there, because I know when I've reviewed some of my videos, I'm like, okay, I'm saying friendly sign here and there. That might be confusing for some of you. Hi, Kamal. Thanks for the love. All right. Hey, Joe Fernandez. Joe boy. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. I think we all should be able to love whoever we want. That was kind of funny. In my current relationship, so, you know, my family loves my partner, but there's a little controversy with his family, and he's like, I should be able to love whoever I want. And I go, you make it seem like we're not heterosexual here, you know, because it's like, yes, we all should be able to love whoever we want. We were also talking about that yesterday. I was kind of talking to him about, you know, I have some clients, you know, that I deal with all kinds of clients and situations, and I said, you know, for me, I would rather two people love each other under whatever conditions or you know, whatever, than people be alone. Like, unless you want to be alone. Like, if you're a hermit and you want to be alone and you're asexual, I wish that for you too. I wish you all the peace and isolation that you would want, as long as it's healthy, you know. Yes, I will. I hope you find happiness. All right, so let's see here. That is okay. And actually, honestly, it was like, so with some of that, I don't want to get too much into the details of it, but I was telling my aunt, I'm like, you know, it's kind of a little nice that I'm not obligated to go to certain things. Like, I don't want to, you know, I don't necessarily, I pretty much like everyone, but it's like, some people, maybe if they're low vibe, I prefer not to be around, you know? So well, it's not really, at least I don't have to try to impress people that wouldn't like me, right? So anyways, even if they are not technically conjuncting, okay, but I think that two planets in the same sign, even if they are not technically conjuncting, tend to give some feeling of a conjunction. So I do agree there with her on that, and I've said that in the past. That is no different from the same thing in a natal chart. For example, during the 2 years or so that Saturn takes to move through a sign, there will be times when it isn't quite in conjunction with an outer planet also passing through that sign. The two both retrograde and do a little dance back and forth together, right, for about 2.5 years. And they'll also kind of like right now, Pluto, well, I saw Saturn do this I think around 2020 or 2019, but they'll kind of like go to the cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius. Pluto's doing that now. He's been going back and forth between, he's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years, but he's been kind of doing this dance back. So they'll do a kind of cusp dance too, not just an orb dance. Joe, I'm proud of you for coming on here and, being vulnerable about what you're going through in India and, and being happy for my happiness, even if maybe you're not happy and you're vibrating happiness. So you're going to find more happiness. So, yes, I'm proud of that, Joe Fernandez. Okay. So, anyways, Saturn to move through a sign, there will be times when it is in quite conjunction with an outer planet. Okay, the two will do a little dance. I think there is some of the same feeling during those gaps, but it isn't quite as intense as of an influence, right? So when Saturn and Pluto were both in Capricorn a couple years ago in 2020, we felt that for a while, okay? And it was happening, I think, a little before 2020. But there was only certain times where it was coming together and causing war and strife and conflict, right? And then we were kind of like, oh, okay, now we're all just gonna, be quarantined for a while. And okay, now we're all gonna riot. Okay, it's kind of like that kind. Anyways, I think there is some of the same. Okay, a person with an exact or close conjunction in their birth chart, I'm just going to sort of ad-lib that, will naturally feel the impact much more powerfully. Audience, you would use an orb as wide as 10 degrees, right? Okay, that would be my question to her as well. Liz, yes, particularly with a conjunction. Very interesting. Okay, this is new to me, and I'm getting the goosebumps. I had a client earlier today. We're getting ready to read. I've read for her before, and she goes, I've got the goosebumps already. And I'm like, we were just doing like a very quick yes or no reading, but I was like, that's so cool. So it's like she could feel whatever I was going to say, because I can only gauge my accuracy through the lens of others. I actually, I'm more of a channel. I don't actually see things. So I'm like, okay, all right, cool. Like, oh, Pluto's definitely there. It's just, his official title is always up for debate, but he's definitely there and he's definitely important in astrology, even if astronomy doesn't want to, legitimize him as a child. Okay. He's the, shall I say, bastard child of astronomy. Okay. But in astrology, he's a very important and also in Greek mythology. Okay. So anyways, Liz, yes, particularly with a conjunction. Okay, there seems to be a lot of argument about orbs, and I can only tell you what I have learned to use from my own experience. I am inclined to give importance to wide aspects, but I would look quite carefully at which planets were involved. So for me, I would say if it's, and I don't know what she's going to say next, but if we're going to do wide orbs, especially in friendly signs, I would say it's going to be more, you're going to feel it more, especially if it's like your birth chart overlaying someone else's, right? If it's like both your Mars are in the same sign or both your suns are in the same sign, or even I would say sun and moon are in the same sign, that's going to be more powerful, I think, than in a wide orb, than if you have like your Saturn in the same sign as their Mars. If that, so for example, that in a 5-degree orb, if your Saturn is sitting with someone's Mars in, let's say, around 5 degrees Taurus hanging out, 5 and 8 degrees Taurus, that'd be 3-degree orb. You're gonna feel a very strong loyalty and sense of camaraderie with that person, and could definitely see a lot of great things through with them. But if it's like their Saturn's 3 degrees Taurus and your Mars is 28 degrees Taurus, I would say with different planets, it's probably not going to be the same. Like you might be like, oh, okay. Like Mars might be like, okay, I see your values, Saturn, and Saturn's like, okay, I see what you're doing over there, Mars. But if they're actually going to get together and do anything together, it's going to be based on the other aspects in that kind of an orb. So an orbit is like how the planets move around the sun. An orb is the actual degrees in an astrology wheel, how close the planets are. Well, I guess it would be in the wheel of the sky, right? So if we're really thinking of it as an orbit in the sky, not to get too far off on a tangent, like say when you were born, and I don't know your birth chart, say that Mars and Saturn were sitting at 5 and 8 degrees Taurus. We'll just use that example. At the time of your birth, then their orbits would be aligned to the sun in the sign like here's the earth. Okay, here's the earth and here's the sun and here's like the sign of Taurus out here in the constellations. Saturn and Mars would be sitting between the earth and the sun and the stars. So it's more of a measurement of, it's like a snapshot of the exact place that the planets were in the orbit, right? Okay, I hope that makes sense. Anyways, um, I would, I am from the West Coast of the United States. That's why I'm representing the Los Angeles Rams today, because they did a really good job on Sunday and they're going to be playing again tonight on Amazon. So some of you all over the world might be able to see it on Amazon. All right, let's see. I would use it to, I'm inclined to give importance to white aspects, but I would look quite carefully at which planets were involved. I would certainly use 10 degrees for major aspects involving the sun, moon, and Saturn. Okay, so for me, the sun is 20 degrees, the moon is 10. Saturn, I don't know. We'll see what, I don't know if I agree with that, but let's see what she says. I also think it depends on where these planets are placed. So that if the sun is, say, in the midheaven, it would be very prominent in the chart. Okay, I would agree with that. Like if somebody's midheaven sits at, let's say, 0 degrees Cancer and Saturn is sitting at 10 degrees Cancer, that would be kind of significant because, that's an angle. So maybe I would give the angles a wider orb as well. That would be the ascendant, the descendant, which is your rising sign, your IC, and your midheaven. Okay. Um, that's like the top and bottom of the chart. All right. I would certainly use, okay. Uh, It'll be very prominent in the chart, and then I would consider that its sphere of influence is greater. I would also suspect that it depends on the person. A very loose conjunction or square will give the same characteristics as a tight one, but they are more diluted, and the individual has more flexibility with it. Okay, so that's why I tell you guys, like with the divorce aspects, like Mars square Saturn, it will break a couple up 5 degrees or tighter. But if it's like 5.5 or like 5 degrees in 10 minutes, sometimes that's just loose enough where they're going to feel sort of the annoyance of it, but they're going to be able to stick it out. It's not going to actually cause that rupture in the relationship. Thanks, Cigar. Where are you from? Okay. Yeah, if you guys want to tell me where you're from in the comments, that'd be kind of fun. We haven't done that before. It's up to you if you want to share or not, but I also suspect that it depends on the person. Okay. Also, if he's putting a lot of energy into working at that aspect or developing it in this life, then it would become more obvious because it's becoming more conscious. I would say too, like I have kind of a stellium in my seventh house. I say kind of because it's kind of like points in the vertex. It's not totally planets, but there are a few planets there. I think at least two or three in different orbs. And so my seventh house is supposed to be very powerful, but it's in a quincunx to Pluto in the second house. So it's like, and one planet in particular. So it's like, unless I'm activating that planet, I'm not necessarily going to feel the quincunx in my seventh house. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Like if I'm in my Jupiter energy, I'm probably going to be feeling the resistance or the I think it's actually a key for me, but that's sort of transmuting the energy. But there's a quincunx. I think it's a quindecile. It would generally be quite challenging. Anyways, yeah, it's a quindecile. Um, oh, okay, I was like, I'm confused. You're giving me mixed messages there. Okay, it was a typo, so we won't screen it. Anyways, let's get back to this. Okay, so if he's working on developing it, it would become more obvious because it's becoming more conscious, okay? An example of this might be a person with a wide Sun-Neptune trine or conjunction who decides to study music. Although the looseness of the aspects mean there isn't the same compulsive feeling, the fact that he's trying to develop himself along the lines of the aspect means that it will become more important in his life. And I would say, he's probably having other planets aspecting his Neptune or his Sun that's activating this loose trine or conjunction as well. I know that a good many astrologers like using narrow orbs of 6 to 8 degrees, but that is simply how I feel about it. This same problem of orbs arises when you're trying to interpret transits and progressions as well. And I tell you guys all the time, a synastry chart, which is romantic compatibility, is basically a transit chart. So when we look at the transits, we're looking at like the sky today or on a certain date compared to your birth chart, how those were overlaying. When we look at you and another person, it's how those are overlaying. So I believe that every person that you come into contact with is a transit. This is why it's good to get away from some people, right? Okay. But once you know the astrology, it's a little bit, you can be a little more strategic about, okay, this is just a challenging relationship that's going to develop me and I really love this person versus this is a relationship that's quite destructive and I need to get away from. Okay. So, anyways, um, so many people think of transits and progressions as operative only when they are exact. But I feel there's a period of buildup which goes on for quite a long time before the aspect is exact. I definitely agree with her there. You can smell it in the wind, so to speak, before it happens, before it becomes apparent in your life. And it's sort of like it's preparing you and molding you, and then afterwards you're sort of reflecting on it. So I think that that's an important part of the process as well. Um, for the actual event that could occur on that exact transit. And sometimes I think transits kind of, you know, depending on what needs to be learned, kind of just flow through. It's like, okay, I've been feeling this for a while, something I've been focusing on. Okay, and now it kind of left. And during that period of time, whether it was a month or a year-long transit, I discovered these things and I learned these things. But sometimes there is an exact event that could be correlated to like when the transit became exact or within a 5-degree orb. Anyways, so I think there's a 3 or 4 year buildup. It doesn't just suddenly arrive one morning out of nowhere. The psyche has been preparing for it for some time. I feel we are sometimes a little too tight and literal in the way we work with orbs. I would like to talk now about the signs which the outer planets rule, because there are colorations in these signs which I think are not terribly easy to understand if you are considering them from the old traditional descriptions. Our understanding of the 3 outer planets is very new, and there is no reason to suppose that our understanding of Scorpio, Aquarius, and Pisces is all that complete. So that would be the latter signs that are ruled by Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune. Okay, these signs are all co-ruled, as you know. I was just about to go on that, so I'm glad she's covering that. Scorpio used to be assigned to Mars, Aquarius to Saturn, and Pisces to Jupiter. Scorpio was called the night house of Mars in medieval astrology. Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool. Aquarius was the day house of Saturn, and Pisces was the night house of Jupiter. The two signs get, well, that probably makes sense because, oh no, okay. Oh, never mind. Okay, I'm not, the two signs given to Saturn, Capricorn, and Aquarius were said to reflect two different faces of Saturn. One represented the principle of order and boundaries expressing itself on the material plane, and the other the same principle on the mental or spiritual plane. Pisces and Sagittarius were said to reflect the principle of expansion and growth and faith on the emotional plane and the intellectual one, respectively. And Aries and Scorpio were said to represent the principle of aggression and will operating on the creative and procreative levels. So our old descriptions of Aries and Scorpio describe both as willful and determined, but Aries becomes the pioneer or the athlete, while Scorpio becomes the disciplined soldier or surgeon. Pisces becomes the priest or the nurse, while Sagittarius becomes the philosopher or teacher. Capricorn becomes the businessman or the politician, while Aquarius becomes the scientist or social reformer. I think you are all familiar with these traditional readings of the signs. I go over that. I touch on that a lot. The themes of the signs. You can still find them in modern textbooks, and I think they are true so far as they go. It's a great mistake to dispense with the old rulers. I am certain that they are still valid. I agree. I concur. And one of the ways in which this can be seen is when Mars makes a major progression and you see the repercussions through the house which Scorpio rules in the birth chart. So before we get into that, I want to also say that one of the very few, so I have a very strong theory that in romantic compatibility, that if you want to be with someone for a lifetime, your moons need to be in friendly signs, meaning, and I say this all the time, but we learn with repetition, and some of you maybe for the first time that you hear this, if you're dating someone and you want to be together for a lifetime, over 10 years, it is best that the moons are both in air and fire, or air and water, or water and earth. They can be, both in water, one in water, one in earth, but the feminine signs are air and water, the masculine are fire and air, and you want your moons of the couple to be in both signs. Okay, so with that being said, one of the few exceptions I've seen, and it's rare, but I've seen it 2 or 3 times now in couples married like 30 years. Sometimes they are divorcing when they come to me, or recently divorced, but together 25 years. But I have seen them make it is Scorpio and Aries moon, because of, I believe, the co-ruler Mars. I don't feel that it works as well with Libra and Taurus moons, which are both Venusian ruled, and that is a very relationship oriented. For whatever reason, I just think Libra and Taurus are too different. I do think that Scorpio and Aries are a lot more alike than people realize. In some ways, they're still very different, but I do think that there's enough commonality with Mars, with Scorpio and Aries for some reason, that it can be a sort of a cure to that, because Scorpio is a feminine sign and Aries is a masculine sign. I do see also, okay, another reason with Libra, no, not Libra and Taurus, Scorpio and Aries, another reason it doesn't work, say, with like this Gemini and Virgo moons. Now I have a Virgo moon, so and I have a Mars in Gemini, so I've definitely been drawn to Gemini moons, especially when I was younger. But that does make a square, okay? So even though Gemini and Virgo are ruled by Mercury, it makes a square. It works in the suns. You'll see that too. You'll see Virgo and Gemini together a lot. But in the moons, it'll last about 5 years, give or take, depending on, the other aspects. So generally that's how long it will last. But they'll mentally stimulate each other really well. It could be a little overstimulating at times. Oh, cool. Yes, this book is on Amazon. It's about, I think, like $80 for the paperback and $150 for the hardcover. So we get to go over it here. It's kind of nice. I didn't buy this. It was a gift. So anyways, there was another book that was gifted with it that my neighbor borrowed back in LA, and I haven't got it back yet. So I don't know. Anyways, all right. So let's see. Let me just kind of see where we left off is Mars makes a major progression. You'll see the repercussions through the house which Scorpio rules in the birth chart, which generally you would see, expect that in the house that Aries rules. These are called depositors, right? The ruler of a house. So if something's happening to Pluto, we're going to look to the house of Scorpio, just as we're going to look to the person's Pluto natally and how that's aspecting the transiting Pluto. So anyways, so depositors are the planet that rules a sign. So we look at both of those things once we get a little advanced. Okay, let's see here. For example, the Saturnian element is very obvious in Aquarius. And I agree, because I never understood, because Aquarius is so like, expansive and free flowing. But one of my best friends was Aquarius growing up, and my guy's sister now is Aquarius, and they can be quite overbearing too, quite possessive, more than you would think Aquarius would be when it comes to like their people. You could say protective, but they can be quite overbearing. It can get a little annoying sometimes. Like, but I still love my Aquariuses. I'm just saying, if you get really close to one, they seem like they don't really care about much. Like, but they do. Like, they do care about their people. They care about all people and humanitarianism. So that's why you'd think they wouldn't get really attached to their people, but they do. That's, I think, the Saturn thing, that duty, honor, commitment. They definitely have that. Okay. So anyways, for example, the Saturnian element is very obvious in Aquarius. If you get into an ideological discussion, you become aware of the orderliness and discipline of Aquarius thinking, and even sometimes of the rigidity and conservatism. Although the ideas themselves may be eclectic and innovative. That's a very good way to explain it. The competitive instinct in Scorpio is very obvious as well. Scorpio is just as determined to win as Aries, but he just tends to be quieter about it. And the religious feeling and hopefulness which is associated with Sagittarius is just as apparent in Pisces. I have a lot of Libra in my chart, so I like competition as long as like I'm sort of the only one, like the lone wolf. If I have to like, I don't like competitive sports. So it's like, oh, we can all dance and be in choreography and all be the best that we can be. But once it come, like I literally quit dance when we were supposed to go to competition. That's how quite literal. I don't like competitive sports. I mean, I do like to watch, and yeah, when my team wins, but to play, I'm like, no, you're all probably gonna win. I'll just watch. Like, I don't know. I don't need to be on the field. Okay. So anyways, but despite the importance of the old rulers, I think that these three signs need to be involved in some way with the collective because of the connection with the outer planets. They are bound to issues larger than the personal. I have seen a very sad and lost look many times in Scorpios and Aquarians and Pisceans when their lives are too narrow and dedicated wholly to personal pursuits. I feel this is because something in these signs needs a link with larger human movements and endeavors. If you take the typical Aquarian or Piscean and put him to work in a bank and give him no outlets, not even reading, where he can swim in wider waters. Aquarius love reading, like Virgos. Um, I think I touched on it the other day. One of my aunts is Aquarius, and there's something we said. I was like, yeah, bookworm for sure. So, anyways, then I think he becomes increasingly frustrated and restless and neurotic because the nature of the signs requires some kind of deeper food. We are all familiar with cases where the sun in any sign can become frustrated and twisted because of difficult aspects to it, or because the individual can't live in his own nature out in context of his environment and his lifestyle. And I would say that confinement of his environment, or that illustration of his environment, is going to most likely be his outer planets in some kind of contradiction to his sun. Earlier, I mentioned Hitler as a rather twisted sun in Taurus. I think the same applies to Scorpio, Pisces, and Aquarius, but the real nature of these signs is a little less simple. Okay, where's she going? And these average collective blueprint for life doesn't and the average collective blueprint for life doesn't take into account those broader needs. So she's maybe saying these three signs could get a little more twisted if their environment is not matching their personal life. That could be sort of a challenge. When I am talking about these three signs, I hope you realize that I don't mean only the sun placed there, but also the ascendant and any other emphasis such as a stellium. Again, just for those of you who don't know, a stellium is where, and it's debatable, different astrologists say different things, but where there's generally three or more planets. Two would be a conjunction, right? So three or more. Some astrologists say it has to be four or five, or, like for me, I was telling you guys earlier, I have my vertex north node with my Jupiter and Sun, and I consider that to be a stellium, even though the vertex in North Node aren't planets, they're points. But anyway, so hold on, now I just totally lost my spot. But I do have to give you guys a heads up that my battery is getting low. I should have charged it more. And I was planning on spending about an hour. We're at a half hour. So hopefully, I hope if it kicks out, it doesn't just cut off the end of the video. So we might have to wrap it up soon here. But I don't know. I'm feeling a little better now. If you guys were here in the beginning, I wasn't feeling so hot. So I might just take a little pause and hop back on for another half an hour. And we could do, it'll be labeled lecture 1 part 2. But I'll let you know before I click off here. Okay, cool. I'm sorry. Okay. Let me get back to where we were. It's the Mercury in Pisces square Uranus. That's always my excuse. Where were we? Okay. Mercury in Pisces is driving Joe crazy right now. All right. Sorry, buddy. Thanks for hanging in there. Okay. Although the ideas themselves may be eclectic and innovative. Okay, so Sagittarius is just love spirituality as much as Pisces. But despite the importance of the old rulers, I think that these three signs need to be involved in some way with the collective. Because of the connection with the outer planets, they are bound to issues larger than the personal. Okay, she said that. So the blueprint, Pisces, but the real nature of these signs is a little less simple, and the average collective blueprint for life doesn't take into account those broader needs. When I am talking about these three signs, I hope you realize that I don't mean only the sun placed here, but also the ascendant and the other emphasis. Okay, I got off on the stellium. So, and any other emphasis such as a stellium. The same principle applies, But because the sun is so bound up with personal fulfillment and confidence, it's much more obvious if the person's life doesn't mirror his own internal needs. So it's going to be more obvious in people that have their sun in Aquarius, Pisces, and Scorpio if they don't have a good environment. It's more obvious if the person doesn't mirror. By the way, I also hope you realize that when I say quote unquote collective, I don't mean quote unquote spiritual, right? She means more society, like the world population is what we're saying when we say collective. I am not equating these terms in any way. When Jung writes about the collective unconscious, he is not implying that it is a higher spiritual entity. The eruption, so I think of the collective unconscious as all of us living and those passed on or yet to come. Like, I think it's all tied together. Like 12th house. Okay, there's the spiritual side as well. However you want to view that, that's tied into the collective unconscious. The personal subconscious is just ours, and it can, I believe, kind of communicate in a network with the collective unconscious. But that's why people can't, there is, I do believe in some empathy and telepathy, but the reason we can't directly read each other's thoughts is because our subconscious is sort of this container that has boundaries with the collective unconscious. Okay, so good readers can kind of tap into other people's subconsciouses or influence them better, but even then, I think that privilege is sort of an ethical thing where the spiritual realm does sort of dictate, I would say. This, you know, if you're abusing that, it could backfire on you. So it's like, yes, I can sometimes tap in as a reader, right? I read, if you ever want a reading with me, it's rotation401.com. I am an intuitive reader. I can tap into other people's, thoughts a little bit, but I have boundaries with it where I don't have judgment for certain things I pick up on and I don't dig into them. It's like, okay, we're looking at this, I'm not digging into that. There's definitely sort of like a spiritual or intuitive code of ethics. Okay. Okay, so anyways, she doesn't mean spiritual. When Jung writes about the collective unconscious, he's not implying a higher spiritual entity. The eruption of Nazi Germany should be a good illustration. Jung referred to the collective as the quote-unquote objective psyche, by which he meant that it was much older and deeper and more inclusive than the individual's personal subjective psychic experience. It contains the heritage of the whole of man's development as well as man's future. But no one can encompass it, hence it is quote unquote objective. Uh, I would like to, I'm not going to go into it. It's so funny. Me and my guy last night were just debating about objective versus subjective, but so I'm not going to do it here. Strong outer planet contacts don't make you quote unquote spiritual, whatever that means, nor are they more quote unquote evolved. There are few less evolved spiritual beings than some of the masterpieces of brutality whose charts we have looked at, such as Hitler and Lenin. So lest you imagine that prominent outer planets confer God's grace, remember them along with any number of people locked up in psychiatric hospitals. I once met a rather peculiar lady who said she was an quote-unquote esoteric astrologer. And she told me that only people with the sun in aspect to Neptune were capable of spiritual evolvement. I am afraid I think this is rather idiotic, since I once did the chart of a pedigreed poodle who had the sun in aspect to Neptune, and he was a very obnoxious dog. And I would say that, yes, sun in aspect to Neptune, like I was saying, Jung and I both have sun square Neptune, and we are very concerned with these, psychological, spiritual connections. But I'm sure that you can make the connotation. I mean, 12th house can be the loony house. They say people with their moon in the 12th house are either psychics, therapists, or in the loony bin themselves. My guy says most therapists are a bit loony, so it's like it's all a spectrum, right? So you either got this gift that you can use for good, or it takes a hold of you. Everything is a spectrum, and it's always going, I feel, there is gray there, and that's where you learn to balance. But generally, especially if it's something challenging like a square or something that's affecting you, you're starting at one end of the spectrum or the other, and you're trying to find your median. Okay. Oh, gotta watch the battery here. Okay. I hope I have made this clear. Perhaps I should have said it earlier, since there is a good deal of pseudo spirituality around among astrologers. Strong aspects to the outer planets mean, I feel, that your life will be connected to a greater or lesser extent with the larger collective movements and yearnings of your time. So that could be like, even if you have strong outer planets, you may not be that mouthpiece that she's talked about, that we've talked about in previous videos. You may just be someone who feels it very strongly in your lifetime, who's very, like, you are, keeping up with current events, where other people around you are not. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to impact your life so much as you're going to be very aware of it. Okay. And, some people just can live in that day to day and not look up at what's around them. So, that would be the difference of having strong outer planets. It doesn't necessarily give you, great power or anything. Although there is a lot of power in them. But anyways, how this manifests depends very much on your time as well as your own capacity to give shape to these things. At any rate, I feel there is a necessity in Scorpio, Aquarius, and Pisces to find some place in their lives for a view of reality that extends beyond the purely personal sphere. Otherwise, I think these signs can become terribly negative. They have the worst reputations of all the zodiac. I don't know about Aquarius, but I know Scorpio can get a bad rap a lot, and I try to defend them. And then my friend's a Gemini, and when I met him, I go, I don't think I knew what he was. He's like, oh, I'm the worst one, the worst one. And I'm thinking, I go Pisces, because sometimes I have a hard time guessing Pisces was why I guess Pisces, not because it's the worst one, even though she's saying they have a bad rap here. And he goes, no, Gemini. And I'm like, what? Gemini? I mean, I guess they can be a little all over the place, but I love Gemini. So I don't know. I've never heard of Geminis having a bad rap. But he said that. I kind of give male moon or Venus in Gemini not a bad rap, but I do caution that monogamy is not their strong suit, because they usually love at least two at once. But anyway, you can watch my video on that on the channel if you want. Just type in, like, I think, well, moon, rotation 411, moon, Mars, Gemini, or something like, anyways, moon, Gemini. Getting way off, and it's frustrating Joe. He probably left me now. Okay. Free overall expense extends beyond. Otherwise, I think that these signs can be terribly negative. They have the worst reputations. The classic charge against Pisces is that of drugs and alcohol. And so far I have seen that this is perfectly true. Again, that end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, very intuitive, very imaginative, can be great therapists or nurses, very loving and caring. So yes, but yes, they can have a tendency to slip into drugs and alcohol very easily, or people with strong Pisces in their chart. I believe we're doing the big 144 series, which is always on pause, but Whitney Houston, I think she's like a Leo with an Aries moon, I think, and her ascendant was in Pisces. Then we have Kurt Cobain, who was a Pisces with a Cancer moon. So definitely can see that with Pisces. The classic charge against Pisces is that of drugs and alcohol. A great many Pisceans drown in that water, not because the sign is innately alcoholic, but because they are thirsting for something beyond a wholly material perception of reality. The opening of the door might come through a strong religious aspiration, or a creative outlet such as music or poetry or acting, or an experience of the unity of life that comes through the service of some kind. Through service, right? Because they're the opposite of Virgo, which rules service. So there's definitely a strong service element in Pisces as well. But if the door is never open, then the only way to the spirit is through spirits. I talk about this a lot in just my life. Alcohol is called spirits for a reason. Spiritual warfare. I do truly believe that when you're drinking spirits, you are connecting to the spiritual realm. That's why even in the Bible they talk about, getting drunk on God and communing with wine. Like, you need to be, and something my ex-husband used to say is, like, whatever mood you're in when you start drinking, that's going to be exacerbated. So, you definitely want to do everything intentional in life if you can. Like I said, my Mercury's in Pisces, so I'm always just going with the flow. But when I remember and I slow down and I remember to be mindful, intentional, like law of attraction, they call it segment intending. So, and when I've done it, like when you start each moment, okay, now I'm getting in the car. when I get in the car, I'm having a peaceful, joyous ride. Okay, now I'm going into work. When I go into work today, I'm going to have a great work day. I'm going to be, if you can set those intentions at each segment in your day, that's like the most powerful manifesting, right? Because we sit here and we go, I want $1 million, I want $1 million, I want $1 million. No, but if we're like, okay, I'm gonna make the most of this, and this is gonna go the furthest, this like next hour of my day while I'm doing this, you know, that could be very powerful. So I just got way off here. But so if Pisces can learn to sort of compartmentalize like their opposite, that's why oppositions sometimes are great. Virgo and Pisces, suns especially, go together really well in compatibility, just general sun compatibility. I see a lot of long-term couples in those signs. But anyways, so so it's like learning from your opposite, right? Like Libra needs to learn to be, well, they can be quite assertive, but more independent and more selfish, and Aries needs to learn to be more diplomatic and more partnership oriented, right? And that's, we can learn from our opposite. Again, that's why opposites are not as bad. I still drink as soon as I wake up. False courage, false sense of reality. You're Pisces? Okay, cool. Oh yeah, I know, I get it. Like I love Pisces. I have a lot of Pisces in my chart. But on how, it just depends. And I think over time we learn how to regulate these things, and we learn discipline. Or some people don't. They just slip in and they slip away into the other realm. Pisces is the closest to death, and Aries is the closest to birth. So there is that gap right there. Anyways, I don't want my battery to die on you guys. All right. So, but okay. So I was talking about how I always talk about the spirits. But if the door is never open, then the only way to the spirit is through spirits. If you will excuse the horrible pun, I think this is very important to consider if you are doing vocational counseling for obvious reasons. Even if Pisces wants to go and study computers or become a civil servant, he must still have some place in his life for the myths and the music and the poetry and the imagination. There are a good many pathetic Pisceans wandering about trying to desperately become good accountants or stockbrokers or insurance agents and wondering why they feel so hopeless and depressed and lethargic while their Taurian and Capricornian compatriots really enjoy their jobs. So for me, having a lot of Pisces in my chart, I always wanted to go into creativity. I remember doing this quiz in high school, like this career book. He did the whole book, and I wanted to go into business, right? So I was like, my family's like government business, right? My mom's a Capricorn, that's government. It's like, you got to go into a government job. So it's like, I just really want to do business. So I do this whole book, and I'm good at math and stuff. That's sort of the Virgo side of me. And I go, and I remembered back and I thought, oh, that book said business and I want to be an artist. Like a few years later, I wanted to be an artist, right? Or want to be, I went that route because I'm left and right brained, intuitive and logical. That's why I'm an intuitive and logical astrologist. But so I go back to the book and I couldn't believe it because it'd been years, and I find the book or whatever. And I'm like, oh, it said I'm an artist. Like I rejected that when I first took it. I'm like, artist, oh, I'm going to be a starving artist, but it's like, no, you are very creative. You have a lot of Pisces in your chart. So, it took me years to embrace that. And then once I did, it also kind of floundered because everyone's telling me I need to be an accountant. So, I have a little bit of push and pull there, but here we are. It's all coming together, right? It's all a journey. I saw somebody who said, oh, that word. I saw some, just tangent, some influencer or some YouTube author. She's like, oh, when I hear the word journey, I want to puke. I'm like, she's funny. Okay. Anyways, I didn't agree with all her values, but she was doing a video on Megan Fox and MGK, how Megan Fox is pregnant. So if you want to see my viewpoint on their relationship, check out the celebrity live stream we did. It's called Megan Fox and MGK, Are They Really Twin Flames, on the channel. You'll see what I think of their astrology and if they'll make it, and if that wasn't a I'm not going to use the verbiage, but a keep a man type of baby. My best friend used to say that all the time, but anyways, okay, well, my Aquarius friend. Okay, I'm getting nervous and I am very sleepy, so sorry if I'm kind of getting off here, you guys. But this is really good, and it's about Pisces, so I'm driving Joe crazy. All right. So, okay, the same problem applies with Scorpio. I think that Scorpio is very bound up with the darkness of the collective and with the primitive and primordial instincts that have been repressed and shut out by civilized society. Scorpio needs to be connected with this great reservoir of dark, vital life. If he isn't involved with it, either through psychology or medicine or politics or whatever, then I think turns poisonous in him and bursts out toward other people or becomes self-destructive. If he tries to pretend that such things don't exist, then they come at him from the outside. Scorpio has a lot to do with environment, I believe. It might be the second house. It's either Taurus or Scorpio. I don't want to get too far off here though. And I think Aquarius must be involved with the idea of progress, the idea of the possibilities of man in so it'd be that axis of Taurus and Scorpio. Anyways, I think Aquarius must be involved with the idea of progress, the idea of the possibilities of man in some way. He needs to know that he is a part of a larger human family that is moving somewhere, towards something. Otherwise, he begins to become very cranky and obsessive and disassociated. I want to mention this because I feel these three signs are rather eccentric. I wonder what she's a Virgo. That's right, we looked her up. I hope I haven't insulted anyone, but having an outer planet as a co-ruler complicates things, as you can see. We are all collective creatures at bottom, and we are all mouthpieces for whatever is going on in the human family while we are alive. But the focus for some is more diffuse than for others. These three signs are often accused of antisocial behavior because they tend towards strange interests and odd viewpoints. I feel that this is natural due to the rulership of the outer planets. Most of our inbred models of normality are Saturnian, and it is terribly easy for the Piscean and the Scorpio and the Aquarian to feel very misunderstood and peculiar and an outsider. I don't notice this about Aquarius so much, but I do feel it is kind of true, like because Aquarius is all about the people, like Oprah, I believe, is an Aquarius, and even Ellen is an Aquarius. So, they do talk shows and they deal with this whole world audience. But the thing about them is they are a little bit, you know, different or eccentric, and they may not feel that they belong. But they're much more social than a Pisces or Scorpio. That's, I guess, why I don't think of Aquarius like that generally, but they can definitely be very focused and shut out the world as well. I think we must also consider the house of which these three outer planets are the natural rulers, because I think planets placed in the 8th, 11th, and 12th can be very troublesome if there is no understanding of them. The traditional meanings given for these houses are pretty thin and unsatisfying. I know that this is familiar material for most of you, but it is worth mentioning. Somehow I am not very edified by finding the 11th house described as clubs and societies, or the 8th house as death or legacies, and the 12th has deeper levels than hospitals and prisons. Hold on, the traditional meanings given for oh, okay. So now she's going to get into the 8th house and dig deeper into it, and my battery is probably going to die. And I know a few of you actually are really engaged with me right now. So I'm going to take a little lunch break, let my phone charge up, and I will get back on this afternoon. I was going to try to sneak a nap in, but I'm interested in this. So we will get back on in, let's say, about an hour, give or take. So if you want the notification, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And yeah, I don't really believe in horoscopes so much because that's predictive, right? But I do believe that this is sort of my belief. God created the Mazzaroth. He created the stars. He created each of us. We all have a unique thumbprint. So we all have a unique birth chart. There's some meme going around. I say this sometimes. So if you follow me, you've heard it. It says every 55,000 years or 30,000 years that the same chart will be repeated. But that's never true because there'll be different asteroid placements. It won't be exactly the same. So it never will be. The place where the stars were the day you were born, at the time and the place, it's never going to be replicated entirely. And it's probably not going to be anywhere close in your lifetime. So yeah, anyways, I like to almost think in an Aquarian way, speaking so much of Aquarius, that, maybe if there's other dimensions and stuff. Is Elon Musk an Aquarius? I know what he is, but I can't. But if there's other dimensions and things like that, I hate to use the word portal after the whole Lori Vallow thing. You guys could watch my true crime video on that. But there is, it almost could be, it's definitely a blueprint for our lives. But my aunt was telling me this one astrologist she watched the other day, which she doesn't watch my videos, but she's watched another one, said it's like a blueprint for our destiny. I think there's a lot of free will at play in there. So it's more like a blueprint for what forces are at play and what our challenges are. Um, I do think there's certain points we are meant to hit, maybe purposes that we came for, but I think they're kind of general purposes, you know? I think we are very important in our own worlds, but we are, it's sort of like puzzle pieces, but the universe is a huge puzzle and we're just a tiny piece of that puzzle. But, you know, the puzzle wouldn't be complete without us. So our birth chart is sort of like maybe a bigger component of that in the bigger puzzle, I guess is the best way to put it. So anyways, all right, awesome. I'll see you when I come back, Joe, and thank you everyone else for who is in here. I will definitely pop back on this afternoon, at least for a half hour. We'll at least dig into the 8th house. I won't. I'm going to eat some lunch, and I will be right back. Love and light.